Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, May 7th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone. I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman of NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. All of us are vaccinated. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Scott, we're back. We're back in the same room. We're not on Zoom anymore with your cat meowing and my end shutting down halfway through.
We'll see. We're still respectfully distanced. I hope this sounds good. And for all of you out there, if it still sounds distanced, we're doing that. But yeah, it's good to see you in person.
We're sitting in my living room at the Egyptian brass table, which we haven't sat at in, 14 months or something like that? Man, is it weird? Is it weird for you? I've been back for a couple of weeks now in the real world. You just got through your shots and all that.
Right. I mean, my real world has been out in the field every day throughout this whole thing, unvaccinated for a long time. So that was weird. But now it's interesting. Now that we're all vaccinated, most of the people around me, we haven't jumped in yet, I must say.
No, I've noticed a resistance. And what's really interesting, I went on a long walk through the park and the school nearby. Most of the adults were not wearing masks.
Outdoors, you mean?
Outdoors.
Right.
But Homestead High School, which is kind of going again, the kids were coming home. Every one of them was wearing a mask. I think the impact on children has been much more severe than it has on adults. I think it's going to take them a while. I mean, They looked at me aghast and walked into the street. And I thought they must be walking in the street all the way from school because every adult they're running into is just casually out there walking along without a mask.
Right. I mean, I have kids and talking to them at home, it's much different. We adults are like, well, when do we go in the restaurant or when do we go back to the gym or when do we get our hair done? Pretty big concerning topics. For young people, there's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, getting back to school, getting back to social things. And I agree, it's going to take a long time for them to get back and over this and reacquainted with themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we can go out into a restaurant with 15 people or something. They're going back to classrooms,
right,
theoretically with 30 kids in them. They're going. Do they have football games again? Do you hold football now in the spring? I mean, rallies, all the traditional high school stuff is still kind of verboten. So it's going to be odd for them. And speaking of that, apropos of that, this morning, Bob Grove just sent me this a minute ago. On CNBC this morning, the SEC chair was on, and they were talking about Dogecoin and crypto. And the anchors pointed out that Elon Musk has been tweeting about it all week. And the speculation is he's going to do a skit on SNL tomorrow night about Dogecoin. And the value of Dogecoin is now doubled. So this is essentially a thing that's been completely worthless, except in our minds, and it's now doubled in value. And he's saying this is young investors.
Yeah, well, this is where we are. I mean, the SEC is going on CNBC to talk about a coin that is started because of a meme.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't even a real thing.
It was a joke creation.
Right. At least Bitcoin, which we've talked a lot about, began as an actual currency and then became a very speculative investment with crazy valuations. Dogecoin for a long time was 2 and 3 cents a coin. People just played with it because it was fun. And then the combination of Elon Musk and Mark Cuban tweeting about it sent it sky high, 6 or 7 cents. People went crazy on Twitter. Fast forward a couple months, it hit 60, almost 70 cents a coin, which again, who knows what that means in the real world.
So is this the Robin Hood GameStop effect all over again? I mean, Grove says this tells you a lot about young market investors right now.
Yes, it does. And you're using the term investor. I would say speculator. Investment is something you do because you want to someday put your kid through college or finance your retirement. That's not what we're doing.
I'm looking over the horizon, and they're looking right in front of them.
That's a good way of putting it. And remember, AMC and GameStop were called meme stocks, right? Because of the Reddit crowd and the Twitter crowd. And that's what we're seeing with some of these crypto coins, whether it's Dogecoin or Ethereum, even Bitcoin, which, I follow this stuff by the hour, not to mention by the day for my job. Bitcoin.
What's it at right now?
It's about $57,000 a coin.
Good Lord.
And the weird thing is this week has been stable. It goes up or down by about 1,000, which again makes it unlike a currency.
Right.
But as a, and I put this in quotes, investment.
Well, it's like a Weimar currency, except
Well,
it just keeps going up. But
right.
that kind of volatility.
Right, and there's a huge downside, obviously, to something that went so high, so fast, so speculatively, and is not, well, I shouldn't say it's not a currency. The idea that PayPal and Square, and now even some companies say you can use and trade and, buy things with Bitcoin.
Square's done real well by it.
Oh, Square reported earnings last night. 70% of the revenue came from Bitcoin revenue.
Unbelievable.
That's amazing.
Unbelievable.
And this is a company that already was doing well, just allowing payments in, boring old dollars. 70% in Bitcoin. That's how hot this thing is. And looking back to your original question with Saturday Night Live, full disclosure, I work for the same company, although I have nothing to do with the show. But SNL has, and I give them some credit for this, done skits on Bitcoin, on crypto, even on NFTs.
Right.
Someone in the writing room must have turned to the young, Pete Davidson crowd and said,
Right.
do something on this because the kids love it. And so I have no doubt Elon Musk jumps in with both hands on this.
Yeah, well, two kids, one's in her 20s and one just turned 30. They know all about it.
Sure.
They're on top of it. They're trading it. They're doing all that stuff. Okay, now here's another phenomenon. Job creation numbers came out this morning. Only 250,000 new jobs. Now, all the analysts I heard all week were predicting 1 million new jobs. And they coined a new phrase to describe what may be causing this. They're calling it the Netflix unemployed. That if you're getting good unemployment checks and you got Netflix at home, why do you want to go back to work? I mean, are we disincentivizing people going back to work?
Via the stimulus, you mean?
Yeah, via the stimulus.
That's an interesting thought. There were reports, and this goes even back to the first stimulus, much earlier in the pandemic when we were all, locked down,
right,
that said some of the, minimum wage jobs and restaurant jobs, et cetera, right, for them to go back to work would be losing money.
They would lose money, yes.
And so, okay, but that's a temporary thing, and that's partially why I'm surprised at this job number, because you'd think people would want to go back sooner rather than coast on those temporary one-time payments.
Yeah,
that's a risk.
And as near as I can tell, because of all the job listings I see, companies are hiring. They're desperate to get people. It's not as, one theory I had initially was that companies are going to start retracting now because they're facing huge capital gains. They have all sorts of financial concerns right now, but they're not. They seem to still be expanding fast, and they can't find people. And the idea that people haven't had a job for a year and now they're going begging and nobody wants to take them is disconcerting.
Right. The recovery in, say, the restaurant area has been really whipsaw. They had to let a lot of people go because of the closings. And then, and credit, I don't know, people getting vaccinated, credit people wearing masks, whatever it is, we went from, 10% to 25% to 50% capacity. And now these restaurants are, like you say, desperate to hire. All of a sudden they need all these people and they can't find enough. And so you have, chefs waiting tables, waiters cooking meals. We're trying to get everything done. And we've done a couple stories on this, and they're really hanging up the shingle saying, we need people to come back because the customers are coming back.
Well, I know in Florida, they're putting you got to be searching for a job. We're back to the old rule.
Right.
The new administration has essentially said we're not going to require that. But for example, DeSantis in Florida is saying, no, you got to be applying. You got to be going for a job if we're going to keep giving you benefits. You think other states are going to do that? I mean, I think the pressure that, Chamber of Commerce and everything else is going to be pressuring, state legislatures to push something through like that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the timing of it all. I mean, how long? Let's say that the Netflix unemployed theory is true, and that people are saying, hey, the stimulus means I don't have to go back to work, but the stimulus runs out, and then what happens? You're gonna hope those job offerings are still there.
Still there.
And so maybe then things turn around.
So maybe we're gonna see unemployment just going up and down like a sine wave here.
Yeah, and you wonder, a lot of people are saying, hey, I'm spending my stimulus on the stock market or on cryptocurrencies.
Right. Speculation.
Right. And okay, that may bring you enough money to last a while. But of course, as we know, it may not.
It may not.
So who knows?
Okay. You sent me this one. Yeah, we got to talk about this. Facebook's oversight committee recommends that Donald Trump be kept off. I think it's 6 months, right? I think this creates an interesting dilemma for Facebook. Now, all along, I've always, Mr. You know, uh, free market, First Amendment, advocate, that I'm an absolutist about free speech, and I didn't think that you'd take the president of the United States and ban him from any kind of platform like this. Now, an ex-president, that's a whole different matter, but he's a major figure in a political party, and he may be running again in a few years. So, there's a distinct possibility, looking at the numbers right now in the recent elections, the Republicans are going to probably retake the Senate in a couple years. If they do, and Facebook has this history of blocking people like Donald Trump, I think that increases the likelihood of antitrust.
Well, yeah, and
of investigations and hearings and everything else.
Right, and you've hit on the big concern of that oversight committee. Now, just to back up a little bit, the oversight committee was bought and paid for by Facebook.
Yes.
So it's independent in that it doesn't work for Facebook, but hey, it kind of works for Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's made up of professors and some journalists.
And it's also composed largely of global figures.
Well, most are from the U.S.
Yeah.
I believe like 14 of 20 or something. But right, there are some from out of the U.S., which if you think about it, Facebook is a global company.
Oh, I understand that, but they may not have the tradition of free speech that we have.
Right.
They don't have a First Amendment in Ghana.
Right, but what they did was interesting because they said, okay, Facebook made the right decision to boot Donald Trump off of its platform. However, we're not going to be the arbiter that says he stays off the platform. In fact, we're going to kick the ball back to Facebook, and then Facebook in 6 months has to make a decision. And what it did was also criticize Facebook, and this is the oversight committee that is paid.
I like that part about
it.
it.
Yeah, so they're sort of biting the hand that feeds them to an extent to say Facebook needs to come up with an actual plan, a rule that says if you cross this line, you're off, and if you don't, you're on. And that's how Facebook has gotten so confused, that Facebook can say, no, Holocaust deniers can stay on the platform because it's an opinion or whatever. But at the same time, Donald Trump has to go because he's inciting a riot.
They keep moving the yellow tape on every single decision instead of having some kind of statement.
Right, and that's the Oversight Committee's criticism of Facebook, saying, okay, we appreciate that you want some outside counsel. Here's what the outside counsel says. Take care of your own house. Make some rules and stick to those rules. Now, again, as someone who has been critical of Facebook for years to absolutely no effect.
Yeah. They're not really listening to
and
any
I'm speaking
of us.
to a lot of journalists and critics. Right, they're not listening. Neither are investors. Facebook is still bulletproof. But this is an interesting point. And you wonder if, even as Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg and the Facebook leaderships admit to needing some outside counsel, if maybe now they'll say, okay, we also need some hard, fast rules, because if we stick to those rules, sure, we might get criticized, but at least we'll have a standard to go by.
Well, and this committee, what are their rules? I mean, they must be working from some sort of operating, rules on how to do this and what to judge is acceptable and what isn't. What is their measuring stick? That hasn't been published either.
No, and I think if you think about it, even if
they just sit around and raise hands, yes, no?
Maybe. I mean, look, this whole world is still very new. Not just because social networking is new, but even newer are these problems that have come up because of social networking, or at least
but they're new, but they're impacting 1 billion or 2 billion people.
No doubt.
You would think they'd be kind of in a hurry to get this thing solved.
Right, and they're impacting elections, and they're impacting the safety of our leaders, not to mention entire countries and protesters, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, this is necessary stuff. And I mean, the cynic would look at this and say, okay, we've just kicked the can down the road for another half a year.
Yeah.
But it was an important kick, I think, because I mean, really, the responsibility here is on Facebook. And if they keep dropping the ball, then it is up to our government, not necessarily a bunch of professors and journalists, but our government to say, you're dangerous to our people. The first job of government is to protect its people. And maybe that means dealing with Facebook.
I think Mark Zuckerberg's going to be taking a lot more visits to D.C.
Well, maybe so.
Okay, this one was, Grove sent me this one, but this one raised a red flag with me too. Did you hear the other day that the administration wants to waive the IP rights to COVID vaccines?
Yes, that hit a couple of days ago, and it hit the stock prices of these biotech companies quite hard.
Collapse, yeah. Well, here's what bothers me. I understand, well, there's several mitigating factors. One of them is even if they, unleash the patents and let everybody use them, most places can't make those medicines anyway. So it's not going to have an immediate effect like that. I'm more worried about the long-term precedent that, so one person announces there's an emergency, so we're going to take a patent that probably costs $10 billion in R&D research by a corporation and just make it available to mankind, and we've decided to do that. And I'm bothered by the fact that it happened now when there are enough vaccines available out there. They're short of them in India, but India's crisis is a unique one. The more I look into it, they chose the Russian vaccine. And the Russian vaccine worked when it was tested in England 6 months ago, but the stuff that's arriving in India apparently doesn't work very well.
Yeah, India has a few things going wrong at the same time. And I think that may be part of the patent issue, but I think it's a larger issue that you hit on with it's all this money and all this time that goes into these things. And, look at the investor response. I mean, Moderna stock has, quadrupled during this thing. And who's to say that they haven't deserved that, right? I mean, they're saving humanity.
They pulled off a miracle.
Right. And my concern, and I understand where the AOCs and the left are coming on this saying, no, free it all up, free up the insulin patents, free up everything. But what if that means fewer people go into this research and fewer companies spend on this research?
I think it could have a profound chilling effect.
On the other hand, remember when Tesla and Elon Musk freed up the EV patents and the battery patents?
Right.
Now we have more electric cars. That's actually helped Tesla and their mission. And even their investors are saying, ooh, this is a legitimate thing now and not a one-off company. Yeah. Let's pour even more money there. And how did they get their initial money? From the government. So there is a pattern of sort of socialist behavior here that works in the capitalist system.
Oh, I don't mind that. But if this chills pharmaceutical research.
Right.
And it's interesting, Angela Merkel is against this.
Right.
Because what was Germany famous for in the 19th century? Pharmaceuticals, right? I mean, they're Bayer and all that. They are big in this game. And they understand, I think, that if you just give away intellectual property willy-nilly or do it too soon, companies are going to stop investing more and more money. I can see giving away the COVID IP a year from now. Let these companies make their money, reward them. Keep going, boys. Do more R&D. Get the next one. Then make it available to the world. That's fine. But doing it right in the middle of when these guys are still in the game, that's scary.
And here's what surprises me a bit about the Biden administration. The Biden administration seems to say, okay, science can be science and make those profits. Meanwhile, we're coming up with this huge, almost Marshall Plan, not Marshall Plan, Great Society kind of thing to help those who need it the most.
Yes.
And so I would see saying, okay, we're going to buy more vaccines since we're rich with it right now, and send it to India and send it to Brazil and send it to these countries. Look at what Angela Merkel did in 2008. Germany was the one strong economy in Europe. She didn't, unleash inflation. I mean, that's another thing Germany was known for in World War II, among the many things. But she stepped in and said, okay, Germany's economy is strong. We are going to help the other guys. We're literally going to help you with money, not giving away the keys to the kingdom, but stepping in and helping. And so,
which is what we've been doing since World War II in the United States.
Right, and it seems like the move would be, okay, science, you do your thing and incentivize
where are the C-5As full of vaccine flying from LA, heading towards India?
That's what I would expect to see instead of the patent thing, which I would worry, like you, would be a chilling effect on future science. I mean, this whole vaccine thing turned around so quickly because there were life-saving
Yeah.
things in sight and profits in sight, and that's a great combination.
Yeah, I years ago I followed a company here in the Bay Area that had come up with a new pharmaceutical, and they had to go through the whole FDA approval process.
Right.
They had spent hundreds of millions of dollars. The FDA approval process is a minefield. They literally got approved, and then on the flight home, somebody on the board changed their mind, turned it down, vetoed it, killed the company.
Sure.
That's the game these guys are playing in. And in many ways, they look like they're behemoths, juggernauts, but they're fragile. And to mess with them this way seems to me a very foolish thing in the long run. Okay, well, this is interesting. We talk about everybody leaving California, but
No, we don't.
yes, we
Because
do.
we know better.
Yeah, we know better. 5 of the 6 biggest public market debuts in tech last year were California companies, and the sixth one, Palantir, at the time was a
Right, but for years they were in
yes,
Palo Alto.
right.
Yeah.
So, and also, California continues to track an outsized amount of venture capital funding, with startups in the state raising $84.2 billion last year.
Right.
So, what are we to make of this? I mean, you still can't get a U-Haul trailer.
Look, people are moving. I get it. It's been tough for a lot of people because of the economy, and California has become a very economically polarized state
Right.
and that troubles me, and that's troubling, but really miss me with the companies are all moving out of here. I think that could be a couple steps down the road if we don't take care,
Right.
because our tax rate is so high, and look what Texas is doing, look what Miami is doing. They're saying, hey, come to us and pay less taxes. And by the way, the weather's not that bad. You're leaving something behind, but not all that much. And then when you get to the point where they're starting to say, we're gearing up our universities, we're helping with STEM, we're getting some venture capital investment, that's everything we have.
Right.
And they're copying it, and they're doing a good job at luring
That's
some
been
people
our
away.
edge.
Right. And if we lose that edge, shame on us. But we haven't lost it yet.
Well, do you think there's going to be a big migration out in the next few months when people have been dealing with this state, stuck in their houses, and there's a lot of dysfunctionality going around in California. You think they're just going to run as soon as they get a chance?
Maybe. I think that
I mean,
the U-Haul trend stays for a while because
I do
it's
too.
still, even as our rents have dropped in places like San Francisco and San Jose, which are famously high, we're still leading the league in rents, even though
Right.
we've dropped like 20, 25%. So yeah, that means people who are struggling are going to say, why am I doing this? I don't have to be here anymore. I
Right.
can do whatever I'm doing somewhere else. And yeah, I don't think we're going to see a whole grapes of wrath in reverse kind of thing.
No.
Um,
But
but look, California's not doing itself
I mean,
any
we just
favors.
lost a congressman,
Right.
congressional seat.
Right.
That's unbelievable.
I believe it because look
I mean,
look
my
at
whole
what,
life, this is the state of California has been growing like topsy,
right.
and now we're shrinking.
But look at the two things at the same time, Michael. We are hurting those who need it the most
Yep.
economically, and yet our housing prices throughout this thing have soared.
Insane.
That's a tough combination unless you're wealthy if you want to stay here and put down roots.
Apparently, it's back. I just read about it. Was a week or two ago, people camping overnight
Well,
in
that was
front
me.
of a house.
I broke that story. Yes.
Yes.
Camping out in Santa Clara,
Right.
right?
Santa Clara.
Right next door to you, and camping out in order to get one of, I think it was 12 or 18 townhouses
Townhouses.
that
Yeah.
were starting at something like 1.2.
Yeah, it was a brand new development, right?
Right. And so, imagine some of the comments I got were like, wait a minute, you in California are famous for what? Homeless people along the side of the roads in tents. Now you got people in tents so that they can pay $1 million for
Yeah.
a townhouse. And people really enjoyed that because
I
they
think-
enjoyed it at our expense.
Yes, I
So
think
that
the
story got
solution for
picked
the
up.
homeless is
Yeah.
to declare themselves artists, because San Francisco now is saying it's going to subsidize artists, right?
Well, let's give San Francisco some credit and Mayor London Breed because they have turned this COVID thing around like no other city in the
They
country.
did.
And that's step one. Step two, fill those restaurants.
Yes.
Not just with customers, but with working people. Making at least $15 an hour, hopefully more. Step three, clean up the homeless. It's tough. California's got it bad because it's wide open. It's got good weather. It does have a lot of money, but it also has a lot of. It hits the economic extremes on both sides, and that's a really tough way to bring people together.
Well, one of the blessings besides this wonderful weather we're in right now is we didn't get hit with all the fear of the COVID variant hitting us. It hasn't appeared so far.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Knock on wood.
Knock on your Egyptian table.
Knock on my, yeah. Oh, this is an interesting story. I just read this. They just discovered a vulnerability inside Qualcomm's chips, representing potentially 30% of the world's smartphones.
Well, because Qualcomm, remember, they're the leader in this
Oh,
space,
I know.
especially when it comes to Android. So you're talking about Android phones here made by the likes of Samsung. And this is brand new. This
like
is
mine.
This has just hit even the trade press. It's not even getting a whole lot of attention yet. So good for you for scooping this. But like every sort of virus, every bug, we don't yet know how big it's going to be. But the idea that you can somehow get into a phone's chip to extract data is obviously super dangerous given what we do on our smartphones.
Yeah.
So it's one to watch, definitely.
Especially when our phones are tracking us now wherever we go.
That too.
Qualcomm is such an interesting company. It kind of came out of nowhere. It's in San Diego. Even San Diegans they're proud of Qualcomm, but they don't know anything about it. I mean, it's a very quiet company, but it's been a juggernaut. And this is the first chink in their armor that I've seen.
I think so. I haven't heard of many bugs with Qualcomm, and that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But they're a very vulnerable company because they go through silicon foundries, right?
I think so.
I mean, aren't basically all their chips being made on the other side of the Pacific?
Very likely.
That's scary stuff.
Right. That's true. That's true.
So we'll see. We'll learn more. And Bill and Melinda Gates are divorcing. After 27 years? That's interesting.
That's none of our business, but yeah, it's
it's our business because it's just so much money involved. The third richest man in the world or something now. He was the most.
May they compete for who spends the most in charity, like Mackenzie Scott does, because boy, did she become a force.
I think it's going to be amicable too. I think they're going to continue running the Gates Foundation.
Yes.
Look, I've known Bill since he was 20 years old. I was on a story for the Merc down in New Orleans, and I at an event, and I sat with Bill, and he was a kid, with kind of your ultimate nerdy kid, no personal hygiene. I mean, not many years after that, Bob Grove was filming him for something, and the camera could not see through Gates's glasses. They were so dirty. So Bob walked over and took them off his face, cleaned them up, and handed it back to him. And then 20 years ago, when I was doing my PBS series, and actually Bob was directing it, I went up to Redmond and interviewed Bill. And the transformation, he had been married a few years at that point. The transformation was astounding. I wrote to Bob last night mentioning it. He said it was the first time I actually thought that Bill Gates could be a normal human being. Because he was well dressed, he was clean, he was articulate, he was on time. And he even as he walked out, he went into a little green room area and played with my kids, who were, I think, 3 and 8 at the time. And he got down with them and talked to them and asked what they were doing in school and all that. And I thought, this is the new Bill Gates. And this is the Bill Gates we see now. So I just want to thank Melinda Gates because I know she was the domesticating, civilizing influence on Bill Gates. And, I hope he knows that as he goes into this next phase of his life.
Very likely, and then that's really well said. That's a great story. I interviewed him a couple of times, and my impression was that, and not that I understand if I'm interviewing a tech person, they're not going to be that challenged. I'm not as educated and whatever. But you could sort of see him mentally tick off 14 other things.
He was multitasking while he was talking to me too.
It's humbling.
Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week, maybe from a studio. Bye-bye.